Bruchim Aboyim to the seventh and continuing series of shiurim on the entitled "The Oral Nature of the Written Law." And if we could a little bit summarize what we've done over the last, six shiurim, 6 weeks. I think it's been more than 6 weeks, but in any case, over the period of time, then in the first 5 shiurim, the first 5 lectures, we tried to establish that Chazal understood the structure of the derashot, of the written law, as being, in a certain sense, parallel, commensurable with the structure of the written law. And we developed this theme in the first 5 lectures. In the 6th lecture, we went to apply this in the case of the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach is, in fact, actually a mitzvah which appears in many places, several places in the Chumash, and there are obviously variations in the different places where it appears. And as the Chazanish writes in the Seder Sinas Parshas Torah, which is Siman Kuf Chaf Hey and Eirachayit, that in fact the changes in the different places where the mitzvah appears in the Chumash is coming to merames, to allude to us as to the way that Chazal understood the psukim in terms of their drashas and in terms of their interpretation of the written law. So, actually applying the maxim of the Chazanish, which I guess is the inspiration behind all of these shiurim, we're going to look a little bit at the Korban Pesach. Now, last time I mentioned the fact that the Korban Pesach appears in several places. We spoke about the what appears to be a seeming contradiction between the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach as it appears in Shmos and Parshas Bo, and that appears in Parshas Rei. And we saw, Baruch Hashem, according to Ramban, that in fact, in a certain sense, the psukim in Devarim, in Parshas Rei, can be understood to be actually referring to the psukim in Parshas Bo, which in a certain sense means that Sefer Devarim, while including the Korban Pesach, together with the Shlomit and other Korbanos, the Shalmei Simcha, which were actually brought not only during the 7 days of the Yom Tov of Pesach, but actually were brought actually on the Leil HaSeder, as we'll see in Mitzvah Shem and the Rambam and Perach and Lichos Chametz HaMatzah. Then in a certain sense we understand that Devarim is a type of a commentary on Parshas Shmos, and in fact actually the mitzvah of Korban Pesach appears in part and parcel of those things which are which the Chumash speaks about, and right in the Shalmei Simcha, and we'll see maybe the Chagigas Yudalit. All of these are in fact actually the subject of the psukim in Parshas Rei. Okay, in any case, what I wanted to speak about and go a little bit further into this issue was 2 psukim in Shmos, not in Parshas Shmos, but in Sefer Shmos, which in fact have been the subject of much discussion over not only in the 21st century, but in the 20th century, perhaps even at the end of the 19th century. And there were, in fact, in addition to the major halachas of the Korban Pesach, which appear in Parshas Bo, let's summarize a little bit again, those of you who have a chumash in front of you, and those of you who don't have a chumash in front of you, even though Devar Mishebechsav Yata Rosh Elohim Be'al Peh, but I have a chumash in front of me in any case. The main halachas, as they appear in Parshas Bo, are actually in Perek Yud Beis. Perek Yud Beis in Shmos, that's Parshas Bo, and they appear actually in 2 parshas. Well, 2 parshas means in terms of psuchas and stumais. So you have actually in Perek Yud Beis from Pasuk Aleph, right? Pasuk Aleph until I'm turning the pages right over here, from Pasuk Aleph until Pasuk through including Pasuk Chaf, and then the Parsha Psucha you have from once again in Perek Yud Beis from Pasuk Chaf Aleph you have Psukim until including Parsha Chaf Ches when you have a Parsha Stuma. Okay, and then however in Parshas Mishpatim, there's the tzivoy on the shalosh regalim. First begins the tzivoy on Shabbos or Shvius. It depends Rabbi Akiva, however we learn it's Machos Tanoim. And then in Perach Gimel, Pasuk Yudalit, Shalosh regalim tachag li bashana, speaks about making a chag 3 times during the year. Chag HaMatzos, right? Chag HaKotzil, right? Chag HaKotzil. And then Pasuk Yud Zayin, Shalosh Pam Bashana Yereh Kol Zchor Panei Ha'adon Hashem. And then Pasuk Yud Ches, Lo Yisizbach Al Chometz Dam Zivchi V'lo Yolin Chilev Chag Yad Boiker. So in other words, this is the way Chazal understood, for the most part. Actually, there's a for the most part, the way Chazal understood. So the first part of the pasuk, Lo Yisizbach Al Chometz Dam Zivchi. This is referred, in fact, actually, speaking to the Korban Pesach, right? The Korban Pesach. There's literally no other way of reading the reisha of the reisha of the pasuk for the Aslachta. Lo shishchad is a Pesach b'yodal pedisam, according from Rashi, from Bechilta, Ach Tevoras HaChametz, and then the next part of the pasuk for Yolin Chilev Chag Yad Boiker, which Pashas is speaking about the Korban Pesach. But we'll see in Chazal, it could be referring, in addition to the Korban Pesach, we'll see in Chazal, they could be referring to maybe the Chagigas Yudalit, or the Shalmei Simcha, the brother Korban Pesach. But nonetheless, the reference is actually to Pesach. Okay? But as I said before, this is subject to opinions in Chazal. But certainly, the thrust of the pasuk is referring to Pesach. Now, in addition, towards the end of Parshas Kisisa, we also have a tzivoy of the shalosh regalim. Okay, shalosh regalim. And then there, in Perek Lamed Dalet, in Pasuk Chafei, we have a pasuk which is similar, parallel, not exactly word for word, to the pasuk in Mishpatim. And there it says in Perek Lamed Dalet, Pasuk Chafei, Lo yisishchal al chametz dam zivchi, v'lo yolin la boike zevach chag HaPesach. And on the what does it mean? So in other words, Lo sishchal al chametz dam zivchi, that's clearly referring to the Korban Pesach. And Lo yolin la boike zevach chag HaPesach, this is a machlokes tanoim, whether it's referring to only the Korban Pesach, or whether it's also referring to the Chagigas Yudalit. It's a machlokes Chachamim and Ben Tema. Chazal bring an opinion of Ben Tema, right, which is not right. And Daf Ayin with Aleph in Pesach, and Ben Tema learns from the pasuk V'lo yolin laboike zevach chag HaPesach. Zevach chag ze chagiga. Meaning the chagigas Yudalit. There was a special chagiga that was brought on Erev Pesach, that the Korban Pesach should be eaten al hasoiva. Okay, and HaPesach kabashmo, and HaPesach was therefore the pasuk is actually the pasuk Zevach Chag HaPesach. Zevach refers to the Chagigas Yudalit, and Pesach refers to the Korban Pesach. The pasuk referring to 2 korbanos, right? According to the Gemara Daf Ayin Aleph now. So therefore, according to Ben Tema, the Chagigas Yudalit has the same din as the Korban Pesach, that you can not, it can be only eaten until Omar HaShachar. And that's the opinion of Ben Tema. Macholik on that. Ben Tema also gives the Chagigas Yudalit other dinim of the Korban Pesach. There's a famous machlokes on that. That's why on your Seder plate, the hard-boiled egg, the beit says, as in addition to be boiled, is also roasted to mekayim the sheet of Ben Tema. So, but in any case, Chazal understood that in fact there was a machlokes Chazal was referring to the Korban Pesach and the Chagigas Yudalit, or just the Korban Pesach. Regarding the pasuk in Mishpatim, so then the Pashto says that it's referring to, in fact, actually the Korban Pesach, even though there are different opinions in Chazal whether it's referring to actually Chagigas Yudalit too. I don't want to go into, I'm not going to give a shiur be'iyun on how Chazal understood the Psukim, but nonetheless, we can be safe to say, certainly for this shiur, that the standard opinion of Chazal is referring to either the Korban Pesach, and perhaps, according to some opinions, the Chagigas Yudalit, or any Chagigah that was brought together with the Korban Pesach. Now, the issue that has occupied many people over the last century, over 100 years, maybe over 100 years, is the fact is that in Mishpatim, many people wanted to claim, some people wanted to claim, that in fact we don't see clearly a direct reference to the Korban Pesach. Certainly, the pasuk in Mishpatim, Chav Gimel Yud Ches, it just says, "Lo sizbach al chometz dam zivchi, v'lo yolin chelav chagi ad boiker." And chagi could refer to, in fact, actually the Korban Pesach is not mentioned explicitly. Even the pasuk at the end of Parshas Kisisa was raised, and even though it says "V'yolin laboika zevach chag haPasach," but zevach chag haPasach could mean the zevach, the celebration of the chag of Pesach. But who says it's referring to the Korban Pesach, as prescribed in Shmos, in Parshas Bo? And this led to many wild theories, different types of theories, right? Some of which not only bordered but actually constitute apikosos d'oraisa. But we're not going to. I don't think it's worth it to go into these things because clearly, as we see, the reading is clearly faulty. It's very good to have an agenda, but the presence of chametz in both psukim, at least in the ratio of the pasuk, it's the only thing I can think refers to is maybe menachos, but the pasuk song doesn't read like that. And but we'll see a little bit how we can understand these psukim. I want to address the issue of how we're supposed to look at these psukim. We know, for example, that that in the Gemara in Menachos Samach Vav speaks about a famous machlokas. I think I mentioned it last time. Mimochas HaShabbos, and the Tzdukim, right? The Tzdukim wanted to claim that Shabbos meant Shabbos Bereshis. We spoke a little bit about that. Of course, it means Pesach. But the question is, so why did the Torah use Shabbos out of Pesach? So if you look in the Yosameh, in the Meshech Chochmah, the last person who probably knew Kol HaTorah Kula, there he gives an understanding why, in fact, the Torah used the Lashon of Shabbos. So I want to here try to give a little bit of understanding why did the Torah use, why wasn't the Korban Pesach named explicitly, both in Pasuk Yud Ches, in Perach of Gimel Mishpatim, and also in it says Zevach Chag HaPesach. Why, in fact, actually the Korban Pesach is not actually meant explicitly, but it seems to refer to Zevach Chag HaPesach. And I want to really base myself on the ideas that we've developed, Baruch Hashem, over the last number of weeks. There's a very interesting din in the Korban Pesach, which is actually shared by no korban other than a chatas, and that is that the Korban Pesach has to be sacrificed. The shechita has to be done lishma. The shechita, actually, all the four avodas have to be done lishma. The only other korban which requires lishma, as those of you know from the first Mishnah in Zvachim, is a chatas, but a chatas is understandable. A chatas is coming to as a kapara for a specific chait done by a specific person. But the Korban Pesach, right? Why would, in fact, actually one think that the Korban Pesach has to be done lishma? But in fact, actually, that this in fact actually is a limud of Chazal in several places in the Gemara, and there's no machlokas on this, that the Korban Pesach has to be done lishma, has to be shafted lishma. Now, there are several makayras, several psukim that Chazal bring, but probably the most famous one is it appears in Parshas Bo, and it's actually the question which Chazal, the question is actually identified by Chazal with the Rasha. It says in Shmos, Perek Yud Beis, Chavav, V'haya ki yomru, after the Torah details the avodah of the Korban Pesach. So the pasuk, the pasuk says in Pasuk Chavav, V'haya ki yomru elechem b'neichem. So your children, your son tell to you, Ma avodah hazois lachem. Ma avodas lachem, and Chazal the Bechilter and the Sefri identified as being the derashot. That's in your Haggadah. So the answer we give is V'yamatim zeva Pesach ul Hashem, Asher Pesach al Batei v'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. V'yamatim zeva Pesach ul Hashem. In fact, the Gemara in Pesach learns from this that in fact the Korban Pesach has to be shafted lishma. This is a Ferush Gemara, right? Samach Beis of Beis. Papa says the Pesach is different because it says Omakrov Amatin Zev Pesachu of Yosa. Who l'shem achil. In other words, the Korban Pesach is b'shafted lishma, and that's a unique thing about the Korban Pesach. It's interesting. Why are your children asking you? They don't know the halachas of Korban Pesach. They didn't go to Cheder. We're going to speak about this. But in any case, V'amatim Zev Pesach ul Hashem. Asher Pesach al Batei v'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. So the Pesach has to be L'Hashem. In addition, there's another pasuk that this is in the second parsha in Parshas Boy, but actually, previously to that, in the first parsha in Parshas Boy, right, where after giving the details of the Korban Pesach. It says in Perek Yud Beis, Pasuk Yud Daled, once again, V'hoya hayom hazeh lachem lezikoroi, this day will be a zikoroi, V'chagoisem oisroi chag la'Hashem. Once again, the emphasis is that when you make a chag, chagoisem oisroi, chagoisem probably means the korbanos, the korban, right? Actually, we'll speak about the Korban Pesach, but perhaps maybe even the shlamim that are brought on Pesach. It says v'chagoisem oisroi chag la'Hashem. So once in the Torah is emphasizing in both parshas that the Korban Pesach is called the Chag LaHashem. It's a very, very unique Korban. V'amatim zeh Pesach LaHashem, v'chosim Chag LaHashem. Okay, very, very good. Now, based upon this, I want to say that if we look at the Psukim later on in Shmois, it says, Lo sizbach ha-chometz dam zivchi, my zevach, v'lo yolin chelev chagi, my chag ad boiker. Which chag is called the Kadosh Baruch Hu's chag? Which zevach is called the Kadosh Baruch Hu's zevach? That can only be one zevach, and that can only be the Korban Pesach, and perhaps the chagiga that comes with the Korban Pesach. In other words, the pasuk in Mishpatim is a clear reference to that chag, that zevach is la Hashem. And similarly, in Parshas Kisisa, where it says once again, Perek Lamadal Pasuk of Hey, once again, Lo Sishchat Al Chometz Dam Zivchi. Dam Zivchi. Now, of course, it doesn't say in the next part of the Pasuk Chagi, but it says Zevach Chag HaPasach. So in other words, clearly the Psukim in Mishpatim and Kisisa with the pronoun are referring to the Chag, that's a Chag LaHashem, the Korban, which is a Korban LaHashem, V'amatim Zevach Pesach LaHashem, Chag LaHashem, clearly Chagi, Zivchi is referring to what? To the Psukim in Parshas Boy. So, it's interesting, if we actually take a look at the structure, we have something very interesting. We have, in Parshas Boy, this is really want to elucidate the structure of the Chumash. In Parshas Boy, we have all the details of the Korban. All the details of the Korban, all the Zikas Hadam, the Shechita, the Achila, etc. All the details, right? And then, in Parshas Mishpatim and Kisisa, we have a short statement which gives us very, very specific, short dinim that clearly are referring to the very Korban that's spoken about in tremendous detail in Parshas Boy. In which case, I want to make the following claim. Of course, right? I want to make the following claim. Namely, that in a certain sense, the Parshias and Parshas Boy are a little bit like drushes. A little bit like drushes. You know, where the Torah is going into a tremendous amount of detail. And you see, actually, there's many, many drushes of Chazal many detailed drashos Chazal on these psukim. And then, it's interesting that the psukim in Parshas Mishpatim and Parshas Kisisa, a little bit, which are short, very short halachas, have the structure of a mishnah. It's almost as if that the Torah is presenting us with drashos from psukim, and then the Torah is presenting us with, in fact, actually, mishnayos. Now, in fact, so if in fact actually Chazal understood this, we should expect to find mishnayos which correspond to these psukim. In fact, even more so, perhaps we might find, well, not necessarily a gemara, but a mishnah that corresponds to the pasuk in Devarim Re'eh, because we know that sometimes, as Rebbe redacted the mishnayos, there were mishnayos which are contained in earlier mishnayos. In other words, Rebbe would take earlier mishnayos and incorporate them within other mishnayos. As not only I spoke about it in the redaction of the Talmud, but also, in fact, actually look at the first Rabbi Kiva Eger in Pesachim. There's Rabbi Kiva at the end of Kalim. We all know these Maramekaimas. Okay, now I want to now look at the mishnayos. There's a mishnah in Pesachim in the 5th parak. I have to admit I don't really know the mishnayos from mishnayos. I know the mishnayos from the Gemara. But the mishnah that appears in the 5th parak of Pesachim, Daf Samach Gimel Aleph. Okay, it's a short mishnah. Well, the first part of the mishnah is short. Hashoichet es a Pesach al hachametz oiver b'loi saseh. That mishnah is either lo sizbach al chametz dam zivchi or lo sishkal al chametz dam zivchi. It's a mishnah. Now, it's very interesting is that the mishnah, which refers to about chelav chagi, or dam zivchi, I say dam zivchi, I'm sorry, the first part of the pasuk. Lo sizbach al chametz dam zivchi, lo sishkal al chametz dam zivchi. So it's interesting. The Mishnah, the pasuk is actually telling me two things. One thing is telling me the din that a person should not be shek the Korban Pesach when he possesses one of the chabur possesses chametz. But also, as I mentioned, dav zivchi is a remiss to the lishma of the Korban Pesach. So lo and behold, what's the hemshech of the Mishnah? The hemshech of the Mishnah has to do with halachas lishma. Right? Rabbi Shimon Oimer HaPesach Baba Asol Lishmoi Chayev Shlo Lishmoi Potter Shakal Azvachim Ben Lishmoi Ben Lishmoi Potter. The rest of the Mishnah has to do with Lishma, because that's how Chazal understood the pasuk. The pasuk speaks about the din of the issa possessing chametz during the Shchitas HaPesach, and in addition, the pasuk also makes reference to the din of Lishma Dam Zivchi, and because of this, in fact, actually, Chazal actually took the pasuk and framed it in the structure of a Mishnah. Okay? Now, what about the second part of the psukim? So we have here in Mishpatim. In Mishpatim it says, Lo yolin chelav chagi ad boiker. Now what's chagi? And in Lamed Dalet, it says, so we see that Pesach is also connected with something called the Chagiga. Okay, there's a machlokes Chum ben Taima, but actually, if you look actually the Mechilta, not of Rabbi Yishmael, but the Chita of Shimon Yochai, which is maybe the Rabbi Akiva, you'll see actually that there's a reference that in fact Chazal understood that the Chag of Pesach is referring to the Chagiga Shudalet. As is a sheet in the Gemara and Daf Ayin, that's right, right? The Chagigas Tezvav. In any case, what's the Mishnah which corresponds to the second half of the pasuk? So this Mishnah appears in Pesachim, and Daf Samech Tes Amid Beis. Says the Mishnah, "A Masay mevi Chagigi Imoy." When do you bring the Chagiga? We speak about the Chagiga Yodalet. Zman shu ba b'chol b'tayo v'muat. Okay, now, so in other words, that basically, the Mishnah here is referring to Chagiga. Now, what's interesting enough is that a Masa Mevi Chagiga. In other words, the pasuk is a clear reference to the pasuk of the Torah. Okay, but now we spoke about the fact is that in Devarim in Re'eh, where it says "V'zavachta Pesach L'Hashem Elokecha Tzoinu Vaka," so the way we learned last time, based upon the Ramban, was Pesach "V'zavachta Pesach L'Hashem Elokecha." That means the Korban Pesach, and then Tzoinu Vaka refers to the Chagiga that's brought together with the Korban Pesach, maybe the Shalmei the Shlomim Tezvav, whatever it is. So in other words, the pasuk in Re'eh incorporated V'zavachta Pesach, the Korban Pesach, but together with the other Korbanos that were brought. Okay, I want to claim that this pasuk has its equivalence in a Mishnah, the Hemshech of the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, HaChagiga haisa ba min atzoin min abaka, and then min hakavazim min ha'izim min haschor min ha'kevos, v'ne'acheles l'shtei yomim v'layla echad. So in other words, if you look at the Mishnah says the Chagig would come min hatzoin u min habaka. The Mishnah is really just quoting the pasuk. In fact, the pasuk is the Mishnah. In other words, the Mishnah is telling you how to read the pasuk. That we're referring to the Chagiga and v'zavachta Pesach l'Hashem Elokecha tzoinu vaka. That this statement is actually, in fact, first of all, the Mishnah introduced the Chagiga, and that was based on Mishpatim. Right? And then, right here in Pashas Re'eh, in other words, the first part of the Mishnah is the pasuk as it appears in Mishpatim or Kisisa. Right? And here, right, and here, the Mishnah is structured like the pasuk in Re'eh, because it says, Chagig ha'isa ba min hatzoin min habaka. That's the pasuk in Devarim, Tzoinu Baka. Then it is, min hakavasim v'na'izim. But first the Mishnah quotes Tzoinu Baka, right? Min haschor min ha'kevos. And then it says, v'ne'achelish shnei yomim v'layla echad, lafuki from Ben Tema. In other words, don't think that the Loyolin Chagi is speaking about like Ben Tema, but rather it's eaten 2 days in one, which meaning that, and the Gemara says, the look of Ben Tema. So we see, variously enough, is Chazal understood that the two psukim in Mishpatim are actually mishnayos. In a certain sense. They're the structure of mishnayos. And the pasuk in Devarim is also a larger Mishnah, which incorporates the Mishnah Mishpatim, just adds on other dinim of the Chagiga, namely that the Chagiga's Yodalit can come min hatzoinu min habaka, and is eaten 2 days and 1 night, as opposed to the, in this case over here, right, is Shnei Yomim V'Layla Echad, right, as opposed to the Shita Ben Tema. So, Chazal understood, it's clear that Chazal understood that the psukim in Shemais were clearly referring to the psukim in Pashas Boi, and in fact the structure of the pasuk in Pashas Re'eh, which incorporates the Pesach together with the Korban Chagiga, that the Chagiga come from the Tzoinu the Baka, is actually a Mefusha Mishnah in Sabach Tezamid Beis.
Yeah. So are we saying that the psukim have two, if you like, styles? There's a midrash style and a mishnah style.
That's right.
And the oral law picks up on those styles and recreates them.
Right. That's what I want to claim. What I want to claim is that we see that there are psukim which give a tremendous amount of detail, and there are psukim which give very, very short halachas, terse halachas, and then there are psukim which actually will refer to the terse halachas and extend the terse halachas and add other halachas. In a certain sense, is what's called derashot, mishnayot, and gemara. In other words, a larger mishnah can be understood as a type of a gemara. Or, for example, larger mishnayos, or mishnayos can interpret other mishnayos, maybe a tosefta. In other words, maybe we can look at Re'eh as a type of, the pasuk in Re'eh is being a type of a tosefta, which means it's a perush on the mishnah and includes details that are not included in the mishnah. In other words, in any case, Chazal actually incorporate, but we see clearly that Chazal, right, Chazal, in fact, actually brought mishnayos, which are clear, which actually correspond to psukim in the Chumash, both to psukim in Shemais and to a pasuk in Devarim. It's very interesting is that the style of the Mishnah, Sabbath Beis, is clearly that the last part of the Mishnah is adding details to the first part, because it says, what time do you bring a Chagiga? And then it says, then it goes back again. The Chagiga came from the Tzayim and Abokar. It's very, very interesting. Why should you say when you bring the Chagiga and where does the Chagiga come from? If you're introducing the subject matter, you would say exactly opposite. Say what the Chagiga came from, and then tell me a detail when, when do you bring the Chagiga? But in fact, clearly, when do you bring the Chagiga? Right? Is Chagiga mentioned in the Pasuk? Right? And then, of course, now we add the details in Devarim. The Chagiga comes from Tzonah is a quote of the Pasuk in Re'eh. Right? And the first part of the Pasuk, of course, the Fushim Mishnah, Hashech is a Pesach, Oiva B'loi Saseh. And then, of course, how do we know it's a Korban Pesach? Well, the Pasuk says Dam Zivchi. So the Mishnah there in Samach Gimel Aleph actually gives the halachas of Lishma of the Korban Pesach. So we see clearly that Chazal constructed the mishnayos in a commensurable way to the way you read Chumash. Now, of course, there are mishnayos in between these mishnayos, of course, because, there was a redaction of mishnayos. Rabbi placed the mishnayos, incorporated the mishnayos, would go off on, perhaps, different issues. But the structure of the mishnayos is certainly a Gili Milsa, expresses the way the Chazal understood the psukim in the Chumash. And this is really what I want to claim is the oral nature of the written law. That Chazal base their construction, they base their canonization of the oral law on what they understood to be the structure of the Chumash. Now, that the Mishnah should refer to something which is drashos, that's actually the first gemara in Shas, which all of you learned, or some of you learned a few months ago in Brachos, Tana Hechakai. There was a Tana assumes that you know the psukim, and the Tana is referring to the pasuk. Maybe say Koshma Ba'alvis, right? It's going up a Shalf Kumecha. So when the pasuk says Hemase Mevi Chagiga Imai, that's going on what? That's going on the drasha that Chagi is going on what? Is going on the Chagiga Shodalit. So, in other words, Chazal darshaned Chagi to refer to the Chagiga Shodalit, and the Mishnah just picks up and says, Hemase Mevi Chagiga Imai. It's referring to the pasuk. And then comes the Tosefta, or the enlarged Mishnah, that the Chagiga comes, ben ha-tzodim ben ha-baka, ben ha-kavosa ben ha-izim. And of course, at the end of the Mishnah says, v'ne'achelet shnei yom v'leila echet, la-fuke, the way Ben Tema learns in the pasuk. So, clearly, the Mishnayos are reflecting the oral nature of the written law. Now, this shows that the lack of a mention of a Korban Pesach, which has led to so much confusion in people trying to understand the Chumash, comes out of a completely misunderstanding of how the Chumash was structured. In other words, one cannot learn the Chumash independent of any other part of the Chumash. And this is really what the Chazal Ish speaks about. The Chazal Ish, right, says explicitly, I quoted him earlier, that the different times mitzvahs appear in the Torah and the differences in the way they're worded comes to merames on the Mesorah. Chazal Ish says the Mesorah that Chazal had in darshaning the Torah Shpial Peh. I want to mention, what is Chazal? I think Chazal Ish means the Mesorah. What's Mesorah? That this was the Mesorah of Chazal. The Mesorah of Chazal is that the written law was also an oral law too. Oral law too. I don't want to go into drashas, the Beis Halevi, but in any case, Kipshuta Kamashmo, Chazal understood that the written law was has to be understood within the context of an oral transmission, and Chazal based their oral transmission on this written law, which in a certain sense means that Chazal patterned themselves, Al Pi the Torah Shebechsav, and I think this really gives us a basis for really believing, not believing, but knowing that Chazal, in fact, actually is the authentic transmission of the Mesorah, because they themselves transmitted the Torah in the most accurate way, namely the very nature of the Torah Shebechsav was, in fact, nimshach, was perpetuated and continued by Chazal. Okay, there's a lot more to speak about here, but I think that this is a good place to end. I think that next time we're going to go on to another subject matter, even though I would love to spend more time on the Korban Pesach, but many miles to go before we sleep. In any case, on a very stormy and rainy morning from an undisclosed place in Yerushalayim HaKodesh, be well for Kol Tuv.